Couple things, attendance, noting that Councillor Chambers is not here at the present time. Not sure if he'll be here this evening, but the rest of council is here, rest of committee is here. Anybody have anything to add to the agenda? Seeing none, can I get approval of the agenda as written? Mayor Bailey, Councillor Oakley, questions? All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Declaration of pecuniary interest, if anybody has any. Mayor Bailey?
8.3.
Anybody else? Okay, if some arise through the meeting, then please just let us know at that point in time. We do have a delegation this evening. Casey, is it Nicorek? Nicorek, my apologies for that. If you'd like to come up to the podium there and state your name and address when you do. Once you're ready, you've got 10 minutes for your presentation, and then there will be questions after that if some arise. So whenever you're ready, please.
My name is Casey Nicorek, and my address is 10 Cedar Lane, RR2, Burford. So thank you for having me here tonight, Council, to speak about backyard chickens. As I mentioned, my name is Casey, and I moved to Burford 10 years ago, and I've been raising my family there ever since. I grew up in Brantford, but we chose to move out to Burford for a quieter country lifestyle. When we moved there, I decided I'd get some backyard chickens, but after looking into it, I was surprised and slightly confused to find out that it was actually against the bylaw unless you were an agriculturally zoned property. I felt like I had two options, either to build a coop illegally and hope for no complaints, or to forget it. There are some in the county that have backyard chickens illegally with no issues, but I chose to forget it. I wanted to set a good example for my children and respectfully obey the law. During the pandemic, I heard rumors, or there were rumors of cities and towns changing the bylaws to allow for small numbers of backyard chickens. The city of Brantford was included, and because of common misconception that Brantford and Brant County are affiliated, well-meaning friends and family told me the bylaw had changed, so off I went again to plan a coop, get some chicks, only to find out that my property, when I rechecked my property zonage, chickens were still against the bylaw. So I'd like to explain my property to you for a minute. My house is on 3/4 of an acre. I'm on a pie-shaped lot. You cannot easily see either of my next door neighbors when you're in my backyard. My entire yard borders a very large farm. It harvests wheat, soy, and corn. If that property was a hobby farm, then I could walk to my property line and have horses, cows, chickens, and the like. But the bylaw is preventing me from having chickens on my side of the fence. I'll start with addressing some concerns that you might have. Number one, usually noise complaints from roosters, easily solved by simply not allowing them. Although the city of Brantford is allowing 9 hens and 1 rooster, but this is a simple solution. It could be flexible based on the property size. Concern number 2 may be smell. This again is solved when the number of chickens is limited and the property size is taken into account. When chickens are properly cared for, they are not a nuisance for smell. Number 3 may be the most concerning of all, being the avian flu. I had to do my research on that one. It turns out it originates from migratory birds, and that's not something that we can control. Humans are susceptible if they are in a heavily contaminated environment, meaning the risk associated with backyard chickens is extremely low. It's important to note the avian flu is not passed from eggs or meat consumed by humans. On a very rare occasion, a backyard flock did become ill. The owner would be responsible for the culling of the flock, which is just the reality of the circle of life. It's no different than the veterinary responsibility a dog or cat owner would inherit when they become a pet owner. Mass production chicken farms are at a far higher risk for avian flu, and based on the research that I did, backyard chickens truly are not a cause for legitimate concern. So moving on to the benefits of backyard chickens, there are many. One being the educational experience that they provide for both children and adults. They can help teach our children work ethic, responsibility, and it allows for a small-scale farming experience. Studies have actually shown that backyard chickens can be therapeutic, even proving to be a powerful tool for those suffering from depression, anxiety, and loneliness. They provide eggs and meat as a food source, biodegradable compost for gardens, and they reduce kitchen scraps. Our governments are constantly talking about sustainability, and it's obvious that most people care about the environment and the impact urban development is having on our area. We will tolerate noise, dust, environmental damage for the purpose of building new subdivisions in Brant County, but we're not allowed to have backyard chickens when we live nestled amongst farmland. My address is 10 Cedar Lane, as I mentioned, RR2. We all know that the RR stands for rural route, and rural by definition is outside of the city. This is where chickens would belong. It would only be obvious that some properties would not be suitable for chicken coops and runs. This might include row houses or new subdivisions where houses have only a literal few feet between them, smaller lot sizes. But these properties are zoned residential and they're different from non-urban zoned properties, so there might not be an issue there. I'm not insisting that council amends the bylaw entirely. I'm suggesting maybe the easiest route be taken if it simplifies things. My recommendation is that non-urban zoned properties like my own have an allowance for backyard chickens. Non-urban is not found within the town of Paris or St. George. So perhaps that will appeal to you because the non-urban properties are found in smaller agricultural villages like Oakland, Scotland, Burford. Keep in mind the city of Brantford allows up to 10, one being a rooster. Kitchener allows 4, no roosters, and Toronto even has an urban hen pilot program. These municipalities clearly feel that people can benefit from chickens. There really is no reason when comparing to these large Ontario cities for Brant County not to consider this. I live in a small rural town. I'm asking you just to consider when making or considering this change for the better. I've paid over $66,000 in property taxes to Brant County since I moved here in 2013. It's the first time I'm asking for something to be considered on the land that I own. I feel like the request is fair, and it should have been legal for me to do 10 years ago. Please consider this sincere request for backyard chickens to be allowed under the non-urban zoned properties. I've spoken with Councillor Garneau and understand that Councillors Kyle and Garneau have a motion for the committee's consideration. And I thank you very, very much for listening to me tonight.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Questions from committee? Councillor Miller.
I was going to ask the...
Oh, did you want to come back up to the podium? Sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Miller.
It wasn't a Maple Leaf question, Mr. Chair. Yeah, 3 to the presenter. Yeah, thank you for your presentation. The issues around dust, noise, all that, one can live with. My only concern is that avian flu, and you cite sources that say it's a small risk. What sources have you cited? Because I could find you sources that also say it's a fairly significant risk. So it's hard to know, what to believe. But I certainly wouldn't want to be accused of putting a producer of poultry out of business because of a backyard, couple chickens. So where do you get your sources?
I don't have the actual sites that I referenced, and I do understand that there are a lot of there's going to be a difference of opinion, as one might be for or against. And when you're looking under something like Google, you're going to have a million different sources for and against. I think between just the three that I said, Toronto, Brantford, and Kitchener, they obviously would have looked into that and not been concerned. And you mentioned like chicken farmers. They tend to be inside. So the chances of my three contaminating a building that have 5,000, I don't know if there's an actual case in Ontario that can prove, or if numbers are out there saying this is something that's happened hundreds of times and we need to be concerned about it. So if that's fair, I can leave it at that.
Okay. No, I I want to stay away from the opinion, and I appreciate what you're saying. The chances are small, but at the same time, I would love to see some actual research. If you have anything you can share, I'd appreciate that.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A comment rather than a question, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
Thank you to the delegation. I share some of the concerns about the avian flu, just because I've been receiving some people are sending me articles, and so I think that does warrant some more detail and research. Not necessarily from you; you're not necessarily responsible for that. But my comment is I appreciate the distinction that you've made in your presentation. And I'm just kind of confirming this with you. You're not asking for a county-wide change in philosophy related to backyard chickens. You're specifically looking at areas that are outside of the residential in-town areas. And I just want to say, I think that's an easier thing for us to look at and evaluate. I've had lots of people and friends of mine who are very passionate about backyard chickens, but I've also had lots of people concerned about backyard rats that might go along with them, especially in communities that are adjacent to or between rivers. So I just wanted to say you researched your and prepared your presentation very well, and I appreciate the fact that you made a distinction to the different parts of the county. Thank you.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the delegation. You quoted a number of municipalities that have moved towards allowing backyard chickens. Did you research why other municipalities didn't?
There was one off the top of my head near Napanee, I believe, that during the pandemic they went the route of allowing them, only to want to revoke that, and I wondered what the reason why. And the reason why was the avian flu. So that was what dug me into, is that, like, I don't want to come and propose something that's going to put my community at a greater risk, obviously. So I understand that maybe I need to have some of it cited, or something that could be looked into further. But when I did look into it, it really did make it sound as though if it's coming from wild geese flying overhead, and it's coming from farmers walking through contaminated feces into their coops, the chances of, what are we really worried about? We're worried about humans getting it, or we're worried about protecting our large-scale farmers. The susceptibility to humans from a small flock is small. Those farmers have a far greater risk of getting it from their flock than we do. So if we're not talking about getting it to humans, we're just talking about my flock contaminating a mass production, they're indoor. So mine are not like my 4 in my backyard. What is the proximity going to be to a huge facility that maybe has 5,000 or 10,000 chickens in it? It's actually highly unlikely. So if we're worried about humans getting it, which is completely valid, then we would want to note the things that I mentioned, that it's not from eating their eggs or their meat. That's not how it's transmitted. You would realize you had a sick animal, and you would treat that sick animal the same way you would treat anything, however it needs to be dealt with, it would be dealt with appropriately. If that answers.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, so my understanding is there's a motion here somewhere. Councilor Kyle?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I have a motion here, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Garneau, that I'd like to speak to once we put it on the table. So whereas the county residents continue to express interest in raising chickens on properties not zoned for agricultural purposes, and whereas the county of Brant is an agricultural community that includes many poultry farms, and whereas residents already raising chickens on properties not zoned for agricultural purposes are not compliant with existing bylaws, and this creates enforcement, equity, and biosecurity issues, therefore, that staff be directed to prepare a report exploring the feasibility of a program that allows residents to raise chickens on properties not zoned for agricultural purposes, that takes into account successful examples from neighboring municipalities, regulatory considerations, the potential to limit the program to properties that meet certain criteria, so for example, zoning, minimum lot size, etc., animal welfare, and of course the biosecurity of poultry farms, and that if staff do not recommend the implementation of a backyard chickens program, that alternate recommendations for a program to bring existing poultry outside agricultural areas into compliance with county bylaws come forward for committee's consideration, and that staff report back to the committee by December 31st, 2023.
That's a motion. Did everybody get a chance to digest that? Okay. Councilor Kyle, if you'd like to speak to it.
Sure. So first, thank you to our delegation for her well thought out presentation. This is something that I'm sure many of you around the table have heard rumblings that may be coming forward. I do want to point out that this was not it was not by our doing. It's just kind of happy circumstance that it's come up when it did. But as a livestock farmer and someone who's fairly well versed in quality assurance and biosecurity protocols for various different types of livestock, I will say that as people have started coming to me with the request for chickens, it's something that I've dug into, and we do have a lot of chickens that are not currently on poultry farms that are not compliant with the bylaw, and they're not actively being stopped from having the chickens. So absolutely, there's some equity issues when you have citizens who are calling in and are trying to do things by the book and they're being told no. And then you have other ones that are out flying under the radar and sometimes not flying under the radar. They know they're there and they're still there and nobody's shutting them down. So it does create a fairly serious biosecurity issue, in my opinion. One of the biggest concerns from the provincial poultry associations, so Chicken Farmers of Ontario, Turkey Farmers from Ontario, etc., is the fact that when it comes to something like avian flu, they don't know where the backyard chickens are. So that's where we kind of put our heads together a little bit, Councillor Garneau and myself, just kind of thinking about what could we do, perhaps as a county, that could perhaps let folks like our delegation here have some chickens on her property. That does make logical sense to be able to have a couple of chickens, but also takes into consideration the concerns of our poultry farmers and our poultry associations in terms of biosecurity. Because right now we have a bylaw that says we can't have chickens, but it's not being enforced. And that was put in place, from my understanding based on my historical research, for the biosecurity of our farms, and that's not happening. So either way, there's, in my opinion, something that needs to happen here.
Okay. Councillor House?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, question for Councillor Kyle. So that was a thoroughly prepared motion, and I'm just questioning the delegation, as I spoke to earlier, very specifically was not trying to change anything in residential areas. Your motion is more of a blanket motion that does include residential areas, if I've absorbed it accurately. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little further, and because I'm not aware of there being a bunch of under the radar backyard chickens in Paris, and maybe that's ignorance on my part, but I'm just wondering why you're trying to include those areas And if, well, I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Yeah.
Councillor Kyle?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor House. Absolutely. So part of the resolution reads that the lots may have to take into consideration specific criteria. So like our delegation have presented, perhaps it's just those out in the rural areas or a certain lot size, not necessarily in the urban areas, because yeah, it probably doesn't make sense to have chickens in a little 20 by 20 backyard and have, you know, reasonable expectations that your neighbors are not going to be grumpy with you. So yeah, I'm not necessarily saying change the rules for everyone. I'm saying let's look at how our current bylaw is, how it's being enforced. It's not being enforced, so perhaps there are chickens in Paris that we don't know about, and if we do find out about them, they really shouldn't be. They shouldn't have them if that's what the bylaw. So my intention with this is perhaps if we put some parameters around it, the people who are truly going to do a good job of it and have the space and the lots that are meet that criteria to be able to do so, then that gives them the ability to do that while also giving our bylaw officials more teeth to be able to shut down the ones that are not compliant. Because right now they're not being shut down, even when they do know that they're there.
Okay. Councillor Garneau?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think following up on Councillor Kyle's comments, really what we're asking for tonight and what our delegate has kicked off so well is an opportunity to actually explore this. The motion is written in a way that was sufficiently general so that staff can take that back and look at the tools in the toolkit and the zoning and everything else and come back to us with ideas, but also to dig into that research and the biosecurity considerations and have some of that consultation with the industry organizations, because certainly our delegate has done a very good job of articulating the case, but I don't think it's fair to place on her answering all of those nitty-gritty questions. And it's difficult for us, Councillor Kyle's background in this, there are others who farms livestock around the table who are also aware of these issues, but I think we need to be fully informed in a research-based way before we make those decisions. And I do think that it does need to consider that not all communities are created alike. Certainly in my ward, there are loose chickens that I receive phone calls about. They wander down my road some days. So these are conversations that are happening, perhaps more relevant to some communities than others. But I do think it is coming to a head, and best to have it in an informed and deliberate way. So that's really why I'm supporting Councillor Kyle today with the motion.
Okay. Councillor Bell?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Both Councillor Kyle and Councillor Garneau won't recall the fact that we've discussed backyard chickens, to my recall, at least twice in the last term of office. And I'm just not sure what has changed that would cause us to make a different decision from the one we had in the last term. And maybe your study will resolve that. But I am concerned that we do, if we do this study, that we actually think about the nuisance issues. Remember we had a little ad hoc subcommittee that talked about the unintended consequences of urban intensification. Here's a classic example. I mean, if you go on Rest Acres Road now, you'll find backyards that are 15 feet wide. And I just cannot countenance that we spend time thinking about that. So I would like that if we go ahead with this, that we actually narrow the focus to those areas that might be considered rural or agricultural, but it just doesn't fit with what we are currently seeing, at least in Paris, and I suspect it will be the case in St. George as we expand and grow our community there.
Okay. Councillor Miller?
A point of order and then a comment. Could we excuse that delegate from the podium?
Yes.
Just further what Councillor Bell said. Yeah, we've had two staff reports on this, quite in depth. I think one maybe 8-9 years ago, last term of council. It's not to say that another one, we couldn't benefit from another one. They would obviously start there. Like I said earlier, at the end of the day, whether it's noise or smell or stuff, I think that can all be dealt with. What I would like to see in the staff report, and I appreciate that it is mentioned in the recommendation is they look at the biohazards. I wouldn't classify that question as a nitty gritty question, as was mentioned. I think it's a very important issue that has to be examined. And for this counselor, I think that's all it comes down to. So if that's not an issue, well, probably be okay. But I'll support the recommendation, and this term of council can have a look at a backyard chicken study as well.
Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I look at this as two parts. The part about bylaw, and if it's not being enforced, that probably needs to be looked at. And the other part is having backyard chickens looking at it again. My concern is you're going to start labeling areas, whether you can have them here, but you can't have them over here. And Councillor Bell is shaking his head, and that's what I'm probably going to be coming from this in the long run is that you're going to have it for the whole county, because there'll be somebody come, whether it's from Paris, St. George, or wherever. Hey, how come I'm not included? That's what I'm concerned about. But I do think there should be two parts to this motion. I will support it. But I think if there's an issue that is not being looked after, and I support the livestock industry in this, and they need to know where these chickens are. That's number one. If they're there illegally now, they need to be dealt with. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Questions? Comments? Does anybody need, it was a lengthy motion, but does anybody need it read again? Everybody understands it? Okay, in that case, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay. So that will now go through to council for final approval at the end of the month. Okay, thank you. Moving on to section 5.1, previous minutes. Can I get a mover? Councillor Coleman, Councillor Oakley, any questions on the previous minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Any business arising from those minutes? Seeing none, moving on. Consent items. Consent items to be approved. We have a couple of them here. So 7.1.1, which is RPT-0180-23, which is the owner's endorsement of the operational plan and municipal drinking water system. Can I get a mover to get it on the table? Councillor Miller, Councillor Bell. There is a recommendation there. Any questions on that report? Seeing none. All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? That is carried. 7.1.2 RPT-0216-23, the valve turning vac trailer. There is a recommendation. Can I get a mover? Councillor Coleman, Councillor Howes. Questions? Councillor Miller.
Just in the report itself, it doesn't say what we're doing with the existing one. And I believe that we've seen that at the Bethel pumping station there, and I believe it did look in great shape. So just wondering what will become of the old one.
Mr. Demers.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Miller. It will probably be, when we tender out for the new one, it will be offered in the package as a trade-in value. They'll use it for parts. In its current state, it is no good to the county without the proper software update.
Okay, thank you. It'd make a lovely lawn ornament, but see if you can get some money for it.
Okay. Sounds like an offer. Any other questions while Greg's up there? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 7.1.3 RPT-0228-23, the asphalt milling and paving. There is a recommendation. Can I get a mover? Counselor Oakley. Counselor Kyle. Questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Consent items to be received. Anybody want anything pulled? If not, I'm looking for a mover for all 5 of them. Counselor Coleman, Counselor Howes. Questions? Seeing none. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to staff reports. 8.1 RPT-0237-23 Housing Accelerator Fund. There is a recommendation there. Can I get a mover? Counselor Howes, Counselor McAlpine. Questions on that report? Counselor Howes, then Counselor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had some general questions for staff about this. So it appears that in a world of carrot and stick, this is the carrot that the federal government is presenting to try and accelerate how quickly homes are built. And I'm looking for hopefully some confirmation that there's a way for us to take advantage of the funding availability while controlling that we're the type of dwellings that we're going to accelerate are the type of dwellings that we determine our communities need. And I'm talking about modest housing, I'm talking about rental housing. Or are we stuck if we dive into this, are we stuck accepting that all types of housing are going to have to happen faster, which I firmly believe we don't need. Thanks.
Heather?
I think that's very difficult to answer. I think this is obviously very much the carrot, but we are going to be committing to a great deal more housing. We will still have our planning controls and that will still be in place, but we are going to have to move forward a lot of projects of some fairly significant density to achieve these targets.
That's what I'm afraid of.
So I get a follow-up, I guess. So participating in the program would not necessarily be restricted to just infill, and like we would be, we talked about tapping the brakes 4 years ago. This would be putting our foot on the gas. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, this is above and beyond what we already consider to be fairly aggressive targets. That we already have.
Thank you for the clarification.
Counselor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wondering, I read the report, but there's a lot of details, and I understand you don't have all of them. I'm a little leery of accepting. I'm a little leery of federal governments bearing gifts. Let's put it that way. Do we know roughly how many hours of staff resources would be needed to fill this application out, to do that monthly reporting that they seem to require? So, question about staff resources. Second question is ballpark figure. Do we any idea how much money the county of Brant might be eligible for? And maybe you don't have that, but those are some of the numbers I'm looking for.
Heather?
So the first thing we would have to do is we would have to put some staff resources into completing an action plan. So going through the numbers and presenting to council to consider, we need to adopt at least 7 of the initiatives that are on this appendix. So we would recommend those, and we would also put in some suggestions in terms of how many numbers, because it's not just about the numbers, but the numbers, where they are, what types of housing, all have different bonusing. So council would have quite a few decisions to make. Would we commit to so many affordable housing units? Would we commit to so many multi-residential units? Everything has a scoring system, so there's lots of decisions to be made before we could come up with like a firm answer on what number we could look at. I think it's going to be significant numbers, because we'd have to commit to quite a few houses to meet their minimum targets. So it would be significant dollars, but it is a significant commitment. It will, it'll make it hard for us to move forward with like our standard single detached, even row townhouse type developments. With the land available and the servicing, we would have to be moving pretty much full guns a blazing.
Okay, thank you, Heather.
Councillor Oakley.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a comment about it. I think I agree with where my colleagues are coming here with in regards to rapidly accelerating from our already rapid pace is maybe not the best idea, but I think there are items in this action plan initiatives that we absolutely should take on as policy, even outside of that, in regards to stuff like upzoning and allowing duplexes, triplexes, things like that, rental only zoning. So having this as part of our toolkit when we come to updating our zoning bylaws might be a good plan. Because I think there's lots good in here, even if we don't use it to take advantage of this federal funding, which may or may not be a white elephant gift. So.
Any other questions? Comments? Councillor Miller?
I think I'd be a little more comfortable in light of Heather's answer, maybe pursuing it. But they're looking at some significant houses. Growth should pay for growth. Should is the operative word. Doesn't always. And we would probably need a little bit more financial muscle than we currently have, especially in light of our lack of a financial plan, I guess, at this point in time. So I would be leery, Mr. Chair, of committing to it, not knowing. It'd be nice if we had all the answers in front of us. We don't. That's the problem, and we would commit. I don't feel comfortable committing to something that we don't know is going to cost us at the end of the day. So just my thoughts.
Councillor Howes, last one.
Thank you. Similarly, I don't support the idea of us taking any action on this, and I'd be prepared to make a motion if we need one after all the discussion to not take action. But I just it does seem like one of those too many strings attached, like too many, like it's anything that's going anything that's going to make us build houses faster and not just the types of houses that we specify, I think is too much for our communities. I think it's too much for our staff, and I just all of my instincts are saying this is not a good idea for us.
Right. So, anybody else? Questions, comments? I guess my own comment on this is the fact that two things. The recommendation is to receive it as information and to have staff, undertake the necessary work to understand what is going to be necessary to prepare an action plan for a funding application. But what I'm hearing committee talk about here is, building, rapidly building more houses than we're already rapidly building, if I can quote Councillor Oakley there, and he's absolutely right. I don't think anybody wants that. But there's the other side of the coin to that too, and Councillor Howes kind of alluded to it with our staff. There's no way that our current staff could handle this. We're tuck and go handling what's coming in now. So if we were to add all these extra ones on here, then there's the other side of the coin with the staff as well. So I would be interested potentially at this point in time, Councillor Howes, if you had some sort of recommendation.
I move that we just receive for information and we appreciate the details and some of the ideas that are presented in it, but we take no action at this time.
Is there a seconder? Mayor Bailey seconds that motion. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, we do have a motion on the table that's been seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Just noted that was unanimous. And with thanks, we will move on. 8.2, which is RPT 239-23, overview of physician recruitment program. There is a recommendation. Can I get a mover? Councillor Bell, Councillor Kyle. Questions on the report? Councillor Bell.
More of a comment on the whole issue, if I may, Mr. Chair. I was speaking to Sandra Voss recently. She was asking me, how are we moving forward on this agenda? And in my opinion, it seems appropriate that we work together, if we can, with the organisation that Sandra has already up and running, and that if we can pool our resources, I think we'll get a better result. So I can't remember whether we actually say that in the report, but it certainly would be my recommendation that we add that we actually work collaboratively with the organisation that Sandra is leading.
Mayor Bailey?
I'd like to declare a conflict.
Okay. Oh, my apologies. You did say 8.2 as well.
I said for 8.3. This is 8.2.
8.3, correct.
I'm already on the committee that Sandra Voss is chair of. I didn't know you were going to do that to me. So.
Okay. Well, that's what we talk about committee when these things come across. So, Mayor Bailey, if you could push away. Okay. Councillor Bell?
Yeah, actually, I'm sorry that Mayor Bailey is withdrawing himself from the discussion, because I think I'd value his opinion on this one. I think it's really important that it's such an important topic that we should make the very best use of the resources that we have. And I would appreciate to understand and get the opinion of a member of that group.
Does council want me to turn back around?
Hold on here. If we've declared a conflict, unfortunately, I've got to hold that up. If you've declared a conflict on this, I don't think we can. We just took that training, didn't we? Yeah.
So I am in conflict then?
I'm looking for some help on this from staff, but I think if somebody declares a conflict on something, they can't undeclare. I do declare they can't undeclare. Thoughts?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the conflict situation would be for the clerk to call on, but I can say that is actually mentioned in the report is cooperation and synergies with that group in Brantford.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I would actually go further. I'd say let's not have two committees that work and talk to each other. Let's have one committee that actually works collaboratively for the benefit of Brant County. If we look at healthcare in the county, most of it's done under the guise of Brant County, whether it's the Brant Community Healthcare System or the Brant County Health Unit. We work collaboratively. The Ontario Health Team is now for Brantford Brant. It seems that we should not create a wall here. We'd be much better working collaboratively.
Right. 1 second, Adam. Can I get your input on this, please?
Yes. Through the chair, the Conflict of Interest Act is not really for the clerk to interpret. It's up to members of council to declare themselves. So if Mayor Bailey has declared the conflict, it is up to him if he would like to excuse himself from the conversation. Or not.
I know.
I'm just gonna bear with me, Mr. Mayor. Adam, do you want to weigh in on this?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Through you. So, as agreed upon through the decision package, staff have worked to create some sort of oversight committee for a County of Brant physician recruitment program. I think there's several benefits to why we would look to have a sort of a county-centric focus program. But again, this is brought back forward for council's consideration, and be as it may. I think the report does speak to working collaboratively as best we can with the existing Brantford program, but also noting there are some considerations for the health hub in having dedicated resources to recruit physicians to the County of Brant with a County of Brant focus. I think that if you were looking for a better collaboration with Brantford, you'd probably have further discussions about how their program and our program come together
to work for the county as it is, rather than just having an appointee and providing a nominal, financial contribution to it. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that when we are recruiting at the Sandra Voss Committee, which is the hospital committee, I think we were always talking about the city and the county. They didn't like that we were, but you have to. I mean, you've got the mayor of the county on the committee, and we have vacancies in the county. Why wouldn't I be looking for my own people as part of the recruitment process? So I think Sandra, being a county girl, she knows, she understands that we need our people here. And I think it's just a process to get doctors to come to county and to the city. And I think once we get them here, they're going to choose where they want to live and where they want to practice, whether they want to be thrown into a. So don't forget, we have a ready-made facility that looks very good to a young doctor and his family or whatever, where the city is offering something 10 years down the road, and they're asking you to come into a fractured or a broken system in the city of Brantford. So it takes a different kind of doctor that wants to put in 10 years before things feel right to them or before they can feel established. Where the county of Brant is here, and it's very attractive, and it's still very shiny. And I think that the doctors will separate themselves if we recruit them all together. There'll be people that are anxious to get into an office that's finished right now, tomorrow, and there'll be other people that see it's a journey for 10 years to have a new hospital. So I agree that we should only have one committee. I think they'll sort themselves out, but I know that what we have is money invested, and what they need is money. They have people, they have a committee, and they don't have any money. They finally came to us. I mean, I wasn't even supposed to be at the table because we didn't have any money in the pot until this year. So they were wondering why I was even on the committee, and I was on there because John Bradford asked me to come on. But now we have money in the kitty, and we should be there. And I think just recruiting doctors and letting them fall as they may is the way to do it. It's going to be very confusing. It's like the Chamber of Commerce. Nobody really knows who represents who. And I think that's what's going to happen with the doctor recruitment if we don't get together and work as one.
Okay, if I could, so in the report it does state something along the lines of, a county focused to ensure that, we get a piece of that pie. So if you're confident, Mr. Mayor, sitting on that committee, that the city and the county are of equal balance in the need for these doctors, then I would suggest that that's probably the best way to go. I would suggest that if we're teetering at all, that it might be leaning one way or another, then I would suggest, and this is no disrespect to the city, that we look after our county first.
Well, that's exactly the other way of looking at it. We take care of our own, but it could get confusing. That's all I'm saying. It could look confusing, and it could look unfriendly.
Okay. Committee, Councillor Bell.
Yeah, I would like to refer this back to staff and have them go and talk to Sandra Voss and see whether they can come back with a solution which actually gets the benefit of their experience and our injection of cash. And if we need to change the balance of the representation on that committee, I'm sure they will be amenable to that. Certainly my conversations with Sandra indicated that.
Okay, because that was going to be my second question there is I'll call it part two of this, the makeup of that committee, just to ensure that there's equal balance on that. So you're making that a motion then?
I make a motion to refer it back to staff with that direction that they talked to Sandra Voss.
Second? Councillor Coleman? Any questions on that? Comments? Councillor Miller?
Well, my understanding is that council has approved this recruitment program. I guess at the end of the day, we're looking at maybe the form that recruitment program has. I just wondered if it needed a 2/3 majority, but I guess at the end of the day, if it's revamping that program, I guess that's fine. As long as I just recall that it was Brooke that brought this to us with the intent. To me, she seemed to be the purpose of it was to fill the health hub, right, with doctors. So I guess I'm okay if we refer it back to staff as long as that focus is still there. So
Yes, that's why I would agree.
just want to highlight that and emphasize that point.
Councillor Kyle?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you, just a comment along the same lines as Councillor Miller. I was under the impression that council had approved this direction, and at the time I was fully in support of it, and I am still now. I do think that there's absolutely opportunity to work with the other group as you know the collective for the whole of the Brant County Health Unit and the hospital. But I think there is definitely arguments to be made for making sure that we do have doctors that are coming specifically to work in the county, because that is very different from coming to work in the city of Brantford. They're two very different places, even though we're neighbors and we're friendly neighbors and we get along and we do share some stuff. There is a difference. And as a resident that currently does not have a family doctor in the county of Brant, I can fully get behind this idea. So I don't think I would support the change. I think I would be in support of what Adam has presented here tonight.
Mr. Chair, if I might.
Absolutely, Adam.
I think that the two things through you, Mr. Chair, that I want to highlight is that the program that we, was approved in the decision package that is envisioned through this report is much more robust. I mean, the city program has funding of about $110,000 a year. This is looking to be $200,000 a year. This is looking to have a full-time recruiter just for the county of Brant itself, and I believe the city has a part-time recruiter who is a director at the Brant Community Healthcare System. So, obviously there are tremendous opportunities with a lot, with $100,000 or $200,000 of county funding to enhance the Brantford program. But at the same time, I think there was a mindset that we should look after the county residents that we have already. The numbers are very stark. I mean, you have 16% of residents unrostered. You have 45% with doctors that are, doctors who are 60 years of age and over who could retire tomorrow, who are probably hanging on, waiting for their replacement. So I think there is some starkness to the county situation, but again, we're happy to have conversations with our counterparts in Brantford if that's committee's desire.
Councillor Oakley?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think I would lean in the direction of going with the recommendation as is, just at the very least for this year, maybe next year, really, shore up our shortfall versus the city, focus on that. And then at that point, we can take what we've learned from our own recruitment process, what the city's learned with theirs, and then perhaps have a joint committee at that point. But I think right now, since we have a shortfall versus the city, we should focus on shoring us up first and then get to a cooperative place once we're at an equal playing field, and then also talk about that changing the composition of said committee, so on and so forth.
Thank you for that. Okay, so we do have a motion on the table to direct it back to staff that has been seconded. So we're going to vote on that motion first, and then depending on how that goes, we will go back to the motion that is here. So the motion right now that is on the table is to direct it back to staff to discuss with Sandra and her team about potentially amalgamating into one committee. Any further questions on that motion? Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I have a comment just to let you know that this isn't about the city of Brantford. This is about the Brant Healthcare System, which owns the Willet and controls the destination of the Willet. And you know what? I think it's a bad move not to be doing this together. I understand the difference between the county and city. No one knows that more than I do. Everyone knows that. But we are one hospital healthcare system, and they do control our Willet Hospital, and I can't say that enough times out loud.
Okay, so final one, Councilor Miller, to the motion.
Just a question. Are we not going to work with them anyways, even if we strike our own?
That was my
Would there not
understanding.
be some synergies? Would there not be some collaboration?
That was my understanding from the report, but Adam?
That's what I thought. I just want to be clear on that.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Yeah, as I understand it, we would certainly provide any assistance and collaboration we could with Brantford's program through this. We would be hiring a full-time recruiter. We could provide any assistance possible to work for the betterment of both communities.
Okay. All right, so no more questions, no more comments. We've got a motion right now to direct back to staff. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Okay, so that motion is defeated. We do have a motion on the table, which is the original motion that has been moved and seconded for the recruitment program with the recommendation as noted. Councillor Miller.
You need 2 members of council as well.
Councillor Garneau?
Yes, could I nominate Councillor Kyle for the committee, please?
Councillor Kyle, you accept? Any other? Councillor Oakley?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate myself if I can. Can you nominate yourself? Okay, yeah.
Councillor House, would you like to nominate?
I will nominate my enthusiastic ward mate. if he's interested.
Any others wish to be on or wish to nominate? Okay, so we have Councillor Kyle and Councillor Oakley, which will be the 2 council members if this is passed. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That was carried unanimous. Okay. Moving on to 8.3, RPT-229-23, the final design for 2 Beverly Street West. There is a recommendation. Can I get a mover? Councillor McAlpine, Councillor Coleman. Questions on that report? Councillor Miller.
Just if maybe the authors of the report, Mr. Chair, could speak to the funds involved. Do we need that full 550,000?
Mr. Walton?
Through the chair to Councillor Miller, a few things on site as we redevelop this that'll tell the tale on that is how much there is a little bit of environmental contamination, how much that costs to deal with it. And, but I think we'll need most of it from the estimates we've done so far, yes.
Councillor Miller?
Just know that Burford's looking at something in their downtown as well. So.
We've heard that.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 8.4, RPT-248-23, the signing authority for the Plus 55 Summer Games. There is a recommendation. Can I get a mover? Councillor Howes, Councillor Oakley, stand by. I don't know. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 8.5, RPT-235-23, the approval of a new full-time junior engineer position. There is a recommendation. Can I get a mover? Councillor Oakley, Councillor Bell. Questions? Councillor Miller.
The position is going to be funded, according to the report from Capital Projects for 2023. For 2024, what would that be? Would that be operational? Would that just go into the regular budget?
Mr. Walton?
Through the chair to Councillor Miller, I think we would intend with this, as we do with most of our positions in infrastructure services, is actually mostly fund them through the capital levy. So we'd be sort of running ourselves like a consulting firm where we're charging ourselves out to the projects.
Councillor Miller?
No, that's good. Just, Mr. Chair, I know we have general managers like Rob. They're put in charge to do a job of a department, and if he needs a junior engineering technologist, I certainly don't know whether you need one or not, other than you've told me you needed one. So I guess my question would be, if you didn't need one, Rob, would you tell us and you know, did you go back that way?
Over to you, Mr. Walton.
through the chair to Councilor Miller. We don't come forward with things that we don't need. The reality of this is in the report here too, and this position could be funded easily for us through consultants. But the deal through the consultants is their markup rate's 2.5 times their salary plus overhead. So we get 40% of the year out of their staff. So we could have them for the whole construction season. For this person, we can have them for the whole year. So I think it's pretty good bang for the buck. The other thing is what we've tried to do in the 5.5 years that I've worked here, we've gone from a scenario where we mostly use consultants for these projects, had a few of our own staff doing it, but we built the team here. What I would like to see is us get a sustainable group of here where we can keep them busy all year long, not ever have to lay anyone off, always have projects for them to work on, and then supplement with the consultants as necessary. And I think that's the most efficient way to work any municipality.
Well said.
Yeah, I agree, because I think we're getting to that size where you can almost do that. So, but okay, thank you, Rob. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 8.5 RPT-109-23, the Mount Pleasant Water System Update. There is a recommendation. Can I get a mover? Councillor Coleman, Councillor Oakley. Questions? Councillor Coleman.
Not a question, Mr. Chair. Just a comment. This is a good news story. Thank you.
It is so. Councillor McAlpine.
Just a question. In the package, there's a comment how we're noticing that on average the housing, there's less people moving into them. If we find that, I've noticed in our area, there's a lot more multi-generations living in one home, and I think that's starting to become the case in Paris area too. Is there allowances, some way to make sure that we don't have more houses built than we have water supply, that we run into a problem in the future, or how do we monitor that?
Mr. Walton.
Through the chair to Councillor McAlpine, if you look in the protocol, which is the one attachment, and you look at that graph that's at the back of it, the last page. So that's our development tracking tool. So if you look at the far left and at the bottom, you'll see that the existing year's demand are there. So we're monitoring what has happened over the actual usage over the last few years. And you know there in 2021, there's a big spike in there. And if you remember, that was a very dry year, and the year that we had to go out in Mount Pleasant and actually cut down. We actually had to ban external water use that year, and we also did education that year. And in the next business cycle, we actually changed the rates, which actually put the 30% surcharge on that. And we've got the desired effect out of that. So we are really watching that. The other trend that's been around in all of North America for the last 10 years is on all of these systems, really water usage has flatlined. There's a few reasons for that. One is the cost of water has gone up everywhere because of the cost of running the system. People have better water conservation fixtures, and that's the trend. And industry is finding more efficient ways of using water as well. So we've got a great tool here now for tracking, and as you would know, we did the same thing for Paris. Next week at the meeting we're going to have in St. George, we've got the same tool developed there. We haven't brought it to council yet, but the tool is there ready, and on all 5 of our systems, council will see all of them in the next short period of time. So yes, we're adjusting this all the time to look at what's there and what we see coming. And it's, the graphics of it is great. The picture's worth 1,000 words, right? We could explain that in a 7-page report and nobody would understand what it says, but you can see it on the page there just by looking at it. I think our staff has done a great job in developing that, I think.
Councilor McAlpine, good with that? Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, that takes us into committee reports. Does anybody want anything pulled from the committee reports? Councilor Miller.
Is there anyone here this evening to speak to the community improvements plan?
We've got the chair.
And it's just, it goes back to what we discussed in our training earlier today, and that's, does the word accessibility come up at all in discussions with the businesses that are looking for grants?
Councillor House, as chair.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Miller. The community improvement plan does not require an accessibility element as a requirement for funding.
Councillor Miller?
Thank you. I'm aware of that. But if they're
I don't
improving the
understand the question.
facade,
Pardon?
I'm just wondering if they're improving the facade, if you're going to be making changes, that's the time to do it. And I'm just wondering if they know about the 2025's, deadline and things like that. I'm just wondering, it sounds like, and I think Allison alluded to today, it doesn't even enter the lexicon in those discussions. And I think that's a lost opportunity. So I'll leave that out there for future discussion, but I think it should be mentioned.
And thank you for that. I've just been, and that's right too, there is an accessibility representation on that committee, on the CIP committee as well. Anybody else want anything pulled from committee reports? If not, is anybody willing to move them all? Mayor Bailey, Councillor Garneau. Any other questions on any of them? All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. That moves us to resolutions. Councillor Garneau, you have a recommendation.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll be seeking a seconder. Shall I read it? I can do it. All right. So, whereas County of Brant residents democratically elect councillors to represent their beliefs, values, and perspectives on key issues facing the municipality, and whereas councillor positions are part-time and most councillors also hold employment, are farming, and or have caregiver responsibilities, and whereas the council and standing committee calendar provides councillors with predictability and notice for regular meetings, and whereas the need to schedule special council and standing committee meetings, training sessions, strategic consultations, and public meetings with groups of councillors regularly arises with limited notice, and whereas limited notice and or influence over the scheduling of additional commitments can restrict a councillor's ability to participate and represent their constituents, and whereas scheduling guidelines would allow councillors and staff to have an agreed upon set of criteria understood at the outset by which additional commitments are booked. Therefore, that staff be directed to prepare scheduling guidelines for special meetings of council and standing committees, training sessions, third-party consultations with councillors, and public meetings that take into account, so a list here, limits on the number of meetings the majority of councillors must attend per week, limits on the number of evenings impacted per week, minimum notice requirements for non-recurring meetings, scheduling consecutive meetings, the availability of remote participation options, standing meetings already approved in the council and committee calendar, a recognition that many councillors and residents are active farmers and that seasonal farming activities may impact availability, and accommodations for significant faith and cultural dates that are not already statutory holidays in the province of Ontario. That the aforementioned guidelines do not apply to meetings initiated by councillors in the course of their constituency work, and that staff report back to council by June 30th, 2023.
Seconder for that motion, Councillor Kyle. Questions? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe Councillor Garneau could just elaborate why she brought it. I mean, it's a huge motion, so just tell us a little bit more about what's driven you to do this.
Absolutely, and I won't fully speak for Councillors Oakley and Kyle who are elected with me and bring a different demographic to the table, but certainly when I stood for council, I understood that there would be regular commitments, and a lot of these were known in advance. What I didn't fully appreciate at times were the additional things that would continue to pop up. And several weeks ago now, you'll recall we all received invitations to meet with a consultant regarding county communications. And this was certainly a positive thing, but for me, unfortunately, the time that I was assigned to this was a time where I had a business commitment that I could not move. And in my former life in the university communities, we often talked about representation. And if you couldn't get to the table to bring your voice was lost from both the immediate conversation and perhaps the bigger picture. And earlier today with the AODA training, we talked about that in a different context. You know, I did at the time acknowledge to staff it was what it was, and I didn't ask to move it. But the more I thought about that, the more I realized that wasn't necessarily what was best for the residents who wanted me to be their voice in these sorts of discussions. The further catalyst to that was we are headed into the special meetings around the official plan later this month, and these are key events, absolutely. And what actually was going to be the fifth evening in the last week of May, if one was also on the Heritage Advisory Committee, was booked into an additional special meeting of council. And as someone who's self-employed, I don't work a standard work day, and I can't practically commit 5 consecutive evenings to council activities in the same week without some fairly adverse effects on my family and my business. But I also have a duty to my residents, and there was a real conflict there. And you know, some of us have had conversations offline about, you know, what works best for everyone. And today is another good example. I suspect our colleague from Ward 4 is likely farming, given that it's going to rain on Saturday. And these things impact folks' ability to participate. And when things back up into a work day, sometimes with only a few weeks' notice, we can't always adjust. And it's a real conflict of commitment there. So sorry, that was fairly long-winded, but it is something I feel strongly about, because I think as the county is increasingly diverse and we're looking for people with different life experiences on council, we have to recognize these availability considerations if we're not full-time, and I don't want to go full-time. So that's a lot, but.
Councillor Bell?
Just a couple of comments. This first half year of this council has been a little while. We've had a lot of training, more training than I can recall in previous years. So why that is, I don't know, but it is. The official plan, if all had gone well, would never have come to this council. It would have been dealt with. So we're actually dealing with a problem not caused by staff, not caused by anybody here, but caused by the province. So, you know, I think we just have to accept this first half year is not representative of how business will be going forward. And if it is, I can't support what you're bringing forward. If in half a year's time it hasn't changed, absolutely. But my belief is that in this first half year, we'll get rid of an awful lot of the stuff that's overhung the last council and is a function of starting up a new one. And sorry, just final comment. We have made changes already. We have made some changes. We've reduced the frequency of one meeting. We've changed the timing of another to take an evening meeting out. So I think we've been quite progressive already.
Any other questions, comments? Councillor Oakley, then Councillor Miller.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to add my 2 cents to this, more of as a comment than a question, but coming as someone from the younger demographic, my current working situation allows me a ton of flexibility, so I'm able to make all these meetings work. But knowing what my peers go through, what I went through previously before I had my current working situation, the most problematic part of the way our scheduling works right now is in regards to the events get scheduled, there's no predictability as to what days they may happen. So we have lots of stuff that happens on Tuesday. We have lots of training that happens like today where it's all of Tuesday. That's great. I can work with that when it comes to an employer, tell them, you know, can't work Tuesdays or I might be gone Tuesdays. What I can't tell them is I could be gone any day of the week, whenever. It may just happen. Even on a month's notice, for me, working at most places for someone at my point in my career, I can't get that time off. So it becomes very challenging. And I think where part of this would go, or part of the criteria listed would be in regards to if I could just say Tuesdays and Thursdays, any point during the month that might, you know, I might have to take those times off. That's easier to work with an employer than to tell them I might have to take any time from Monday through Friday off. So just from my perspective as someone who's relatively early in their career, and recognizing that other people who may follow me may also be in this place and deserve to be represented. That's sort of where I'm coming from on this.
Councillor Miller?
Well, I think once the official's plan done, we're gonna work on the strat plan, so maybe it gets better, maybe it doesn't, but I do find as the council term goes on, we tend to add a lot of ad hoc committees. We just did one tonight. Councillor Kyle and Councillor Oakley stepped up, so that does happen. My question is maybe to staff, in light of what's being asked, I guess it could be a simple solution, just everybody give me your calendar, fill it in, and we'll book around it, or it could be kind of complicated. But my question is, Mr. Chair, how realistic is that June 30th, 2023 request?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's feasible. Staff have already talked about it. To be honest, there are limited options available to us. So we've talked it through, and I believe we can present that by the end of the month.
Okay, understanding we're busy, but I also understand staff are busy. But if you think it can be met, I will abide by that. Thank you.
Councillor Coleman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Oakley used the younger. I'll use the older. I think I am the older here. Sorry. I won't support it. We signed up for this. And yeah, maybe there's been an influx of meetings, and I will disagree with Councillor Bell about the official plan. When we went through the official plan last time, we had 17 public meetings. I've never forgot that. We didn't have that many public meetings. We had them by Zoom. So we get a calendar every month. If you can't make the damn meeting, you can't make it. I've never had a constituent call me yet and say, you weren't there. I've tried to make it whether you can't get to the whole meeting. I couldn't make the 3:30 meeting today. As you all heard me before, I don't like meetings near the end of the day. Adam knows my comment. But I can be here for 6 o'clock. And I should be home where Councillor Chambers is too. But I said I'm going to be here tonight because I wanted to hear about the backyard chickens, and I wanted to hear Walton's report on Mount Pleasant, and I wanted to hear Councillor Garneau. But I cannot support this because I think we get a calendar. You can't make those meetings. You signed up for this. We signed up last fall or last summer when we put our name forward for an election. I'm sticking to that. Thank you.
Councillor Bell?
One final thought. We have a system which has 2 councillors per ward, and that should offer some flexibility when, if Councillor Garneau can't make it, she can pass her commentary to Councillor Coleman and be represented, or vice versa, taking this afternoon as an example. I'm a firm believer that we do not actually use the 2 councillors per ward model to anything like the potential that it has. It could actually reduce the number of meetings we attend. When I first started on council, the operations committee had basically 5 members and a chair, which meant that you could have 1 representative from each ward. And it is it's a good model that can work, and I think we're missing that opportunity.
Anybody else? Councillor Kyle?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think I would speak in support of it because I think what Councillor Garneau is asking for is just for staff to have a look at what could work. So to Councillor Bell's point, perhaps it's looking at the model and encouraging the ward councillors to work together better if one can't be there. But at the same time, I also can agree that it's not so much the amount of meetings, it's definitely the predictability. And yes, we do get the calendar at the beginning of the month, but I think every week the calendar comes with a revised edition of it. So there's obviously within that week, since it was sent out the previous Friday, there's been something that's changed. Sometimes it affects me, sometimes it doesn't. So even just a little bit of a heads up, hey, we need to plan this meeting for X. We're thinking this week, is there any days that really don't work for anyone? Something as simple as that could work sometimes for some of the special meetings. So I would be in support of it because I feel like Councillor Garneau is simply asking for a report on what could be done to maybe help alleviate some of these super busy times.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, so now that everybody's spoken, I got a few comments on this myself, and this isn't personal to anybody around here. I'm one of the ones that has a day job myself, and sometimes it's difficult for me to get time off as well. But I book that into my holidays, and I book that into my overtime that I work for my day meetings. There was a decision that the council made not too long ago to take away one of the night meetings and make it a day meeting. That's very difficult for me. I worked around it because, to the point that was said earlier tonight, I knew what I was signing up for. When we go through here, the one point you say here, whereas limited notice and or influence over scheduling to additional commitments can restrict the councillor's ability to participate and represent their constituents. But in your points, you put limits on the number of meetings that the majority of council must attend per week. So if we do put a limit on the number of meetings that the council must attend per week, that's contradicting that previous state there, because some people might not be able to, or some people might not be included in that. So that's kind of contradicting that. Scheduling consecutive meetings, we do that now. Availability of remote participation options, we do that now. Recognition that councillors and residents are active farmers and seasonal farming activities may impact the ability to attend. As you noted tonight, Councillor Chambers is not here because he's in the field. It's a time of season. We understand that. The same with Councillor Coleman. There are times where he's not here, but the vast majority of the meetings he is here, and he is a farmer. When we talk about accommodations for significant faith and culture dates that are not already statutory holidays, we don't meet on holidays. So if we look at the training that we did this year, there was a lot of training. I agree with that 100%, and it was over multiple days. But those that were on council last year and previous years will recall we did all the training, and it was 2 long days where we crammed it all into 2 days. And I think everybody had the same idea then that was exhausting. You come out of that 2 days and you were done. This year, because we talked to staff on that, they spread it out. So maybe one option might be is to condense it again, or half condense it again. Because personally, and just for myself, I'm even as a returning councillor, I think the training we get is very beneficial to everybody, whether it's a refresher, whether it's a first time. I think and it's also, my understanding is it's mandated that we have to do the training. So whether we do it all in 2 days or over 2 weeks or over 2 months, that has to be done, and it's all usually done in the first half a year. Yeah, it does make it a little crazy. You're right. Like Councillor Bell said as well, there have been a number of meetings that we've had this term for the OP. Sure, there might have been something else to fill that, but that was definitely a couple of long days and long meetings that we had to go over stuff again that, to no fault of our own, we were having to rehash again. So I agree. I think that it was a perfect storm this year with the number of meetings that we've had. Absolutely, there's been some meetings that I haven't been able to attend. Do I like that? No. But if we think about it, if we just went the Tuesdays, Thursdays, okay, that might work for Councillor Oakley. That might not work for the mayor. It might not work for Councillor McAlpine, but it might work for Councillor Miller if we do Monday, Wednesdays, but that might not work for Councillor Oakley. I don't think it's a case of staff going, okay, so what day works best for you? What day works best for you? We can't do that. There's 11 of us here. We're not gonna get the perfect day for everybody to show up to a meeting. I don't think it's sensible to think that we would. So, and I appreciate where you're coming from here, Councillor Garneau, but I can't support it in the sense that we've just done some changes to it. I'm not sure what other changes we could make to make it better or worse, because if we make it better for some, it might make it worse for others. So it's all balance. And I understand that, you're in a different situation than I am because you have your own business, which makes it a little more difficult for you at times to get away. And I totally understand that as well. But again, you've got some points here, but some of the points we've already done that, so we're trying to work on that. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that, is the fact that if we do change it, then it might not work for somebody else, and if we leave it alone, then it's not going to work for everybody, regardless of what we do. As I say, there's 11 people here with 11 different schedules doing things. I don't think we're gonna find the perfect schedule for everybody to say, yep, that works for me, yep, that works for me. We've all gotta make accommodations and we've all gotta do things to Councillor Coleman's point. We've gotta adjust our own schedule because we signed up for something that was going to be additional on top of our day-to-day lives. And I'll leave it at that. Any other comments, questions, concerns? That being said, there is a motion on the table that has been seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? That is defeated. Okay, so we are communications. I don't see any. Other business, nobody said any. Oh, Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Chair, I didn't state at the beginning of the meeting, we do have a communication here from Park Lane Terrace. It was in your Friday file, I think. Was it in the Friday file? I had a meeting with Park Lane Terrace, and actually, they're actually watching us right now, as well as Telfer Place. They're very concerned that they're not really informed as to what's going on around the two nursing homes, the long-term care homes. With spring happening, these people are all in wheelchairs and there's no way of them getting across the street. And if they were to get across the street, which they would have to dodge traffic, there's no sidewalk at the other side of the street for them to do anything. They're gonna end up in gravel and then grass, and that's not suitable for wheelchairs at all. They've written this letter to us, asking us what we can do. And with all due respect, Mr. Chair, these people are at different stages of their life where they can't wait for 10 years to go by. They need something done now and fairly soon to get across the road, and so they can get to the shops and the stores across the street, because now that McDonald's is gone, there's no place for them to go on their side of the road just to go out and get a pop and some French fries. So I'm suggesting that we get back to them where we have staff send correspondence back to Park Lane and Telfer Place, seeing what we can come up with sooner than later, so that these people have options on a nice day than to stay in their rooms.
Okay. You're making that a motion to take that to staff?
I'm making it a motion to take it to staff to see what we can do as quickly as we can.
Okay. Councillor Howes, you'll second that? Any questions on that? Comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried.
Thank you.
If I could, Mr. Mayor, that reminded me of something that I saw in the Friday file that I would like to, I'd like to point out to those who potentially didn't see it. And it was for one of our own, Jason DeMonk, the recipient of the Michael Woodcraft Award. And in summary, what it says is the purpose of the briefing notice to provide an update regarding the 2022 recipient of the prestigious Michael Woodcraft Award. County of Brant Operations Manager Jason DeMonk was honored to receive the Michael Woodcraft Award. Jason was recognized as having the highest grade point average for his class. The TJ Mahoney courses are offered through the Ontario Good Roads Association, held at the University of Guelph campus on a yearly basis. And these road maintenance and road construction courses attract several hundred participants from around the province each year. And due to the fact that, again, he was recognized as having the highest point grade average of his class, Jason was gifted a complimentary pass to the annual Good Roads Conference. So I just wanted those that didn't catch that in our files to take note of that. I think that's fantastic and well-deserved, and I wanted to just make sure that was shouted out. Okay, so, oops. Okay, nothing under other business, so now we need a motion to go in camera. Councillor Howes, Councillor Oakley, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Take a quick 2-minute, folks. Okay, so we are back in open session now. There's nothing we gotta go over in open session. Okay, seeing nothing else on the agenda, I would move that this meeting is adjourned. And everybody have a great evening.